common?
All. I mean, I've had all experiences, you know. I mean, I've literally had all, okay? I would also say, by the way, that the escrow doesn't need to be a lawyer, okay? I mean, and in this particular case, the escrow agent could have been another entity. It didn't have to be a lawyer, okay? So we obviously have a good reputation. So on your point about going rogue, yes, you wouldn't appoint on the completion date. So there's been a big discussion about this escrow, but I think I've clarified we never held money. It could have been us, it could have been the AG, it could have been a third party. It didn't need to be a lawyer. It was convenient because we were involved and we were drawing up all these documents, so it was convenient. We obviously have a good reputation, so on your point about going rogue, yes, you wouldn't appoint somebody you didn't trust as an escrow agent. That would be a dumb thing to do. So you'd appoint somebody who has a reputation to lose, okay? And so we were appointed. Okay, I don't know whether I've answered that as best as I can. Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So the escrow agreement has been handed up, and we will, of course, I think we deliver it formally after this meeting as well. Okay. Can I turn to the mysterious, the so-called mysterious Mr. Cunningham? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Honorable Kivasu, is it a point of order?
Karim is talking about a mysterious Paul. You know him as mysterious.
I'm sorry for injecting a bit of humor, but please excuse my humor. He's not mysterious at all. Let me be clear. Mr. Cunningham is somebody I have known. Mr. Chairman, I don't know who's pulling whose leg, but let me continue. Mr. Cunningham is somebody I have known for somewhere between 8 to 10 years. I was asked whether I've met him. I've met him many, many times. All those meetings have been in London, where he lives. So whenever I've visited London, I've met him. The first time I met him in Kenya was when he recently accepted your invitation to appear before the Joint Committee. The reason for that, I understood when he arrived, is his previous visit was on his honeymoon some 32 years previously. Okay? So he hadn't had occasion to visit Kenya in the interim. But as I say, over the last 8 or 10 years, I've met Mr. Cunningham many, many times. So he's somebody known to me, somebody I recognize, somebody I've worked with on this transaction and on many other matters. And just for the record, Mr. Chairman, he is a well-known executive. Previous to Helios, he was the executive on global multinationals and has an outstanding record of service in corporate life. He is not a mysterious man. He is very well known. Okay? I want to turn, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to a number of issues that Honorable Shabir has raised. There were a bunch of them. And I'll try to do justice to his issues. And if I haven't, then he will, or through you, correct me and tell me what else I need to clarify. The first thing to clarify factually is that we have represented Helios for some 15 years. Jamhuri as an entity was, if I recall correctly, formed specifically for this transaction only in 2015 or 2016. We were not the lawyers who formed Jamhuri. Because as you know, Mr. Chairman, we are a Kenyan law firm. We are not based in Mauritius. They use separate lawyers or corporate agents to set up Jamhuri. So we had no involvement in the setup of Jamhuri. So that's just...
Chairman, a point of order.
What sort of order, Honorable Kivasu?
And I'm referring you to item number 4 from Cunningham.
Okay.
And this item number 4, on the document we have just received, Ajawala started representing JHL in 2015. When Paul Cunningham came here, he said JHL was registered June 2016, sorry. Then he also goes ahead and says Jamhuri was formed, and when Jamhuri was considering an investment in telecom Kenya. That is the time when it was looking at investing in Kenya. And at the same time, they are saying it was being formed. And you are saying you are not involved in the formation of the JHL. And you had been representing Helios for 15 years. And JHL is part of the Helios. So you are involved from the word go, the birth of JHL, you know it. And now you are telling us you are not involved with the formation. Can you clarify, please?
Sure. Mr. Njawala, you may clarify that question by Honorable Kibaso.
So let me clarify it this way. I'm thinking of a large listed company in Kenya. Let's think of KCB, okay? It has maybe 20 subsidiaries, I don't know, 15, 20 subsidiaries, okay? Many, many of them. So I can say I represent KCB, and I have acted for KCB for 15 years, by way of example, okay? Simply an example. And that is true. If I have acted for KCB for 15 years, that would be true. But it doesn't follow that I have acted for a subsidiary of KCB, because that could have been formed at any time. Maybe the one in Rwanda, or the one in Tanzania, or the one in Uganda. Okay? Now, the same is true if we can turn to Helios. The same is true for Helios. I have represented Helios on numerous transactions. Okay? When they invested in Equity Bank, for example, I represented them. In connection with the investment in what you know as Shell or Vivo Energy, we represented them. But those are unconnected to Jamhuri. So Jamhuri, as an entity, as a legal entity, was formed 2015, 2016, I don't recall at this moment, okay, but around that time. And it was not formed by us. That's a factual matter, and the record can show. We didn't form the entity Jamhuri. Were we then appointed to represent it? Of course we were. We represented it at the time of the investment, and we represented it now. I was simply responding to the point as to whether or not we had formed Jamhuri, and clarifying that we had not.
Yeah. And perhaps, you know, the problem with these interruptions, we miss on the other question that we asked. But unfortunately,
but let me go back on track.
We have to. Okay.
Okay? Let me try to go back on track.
Before you do, are you sure that you were not involved in the formation of Jamhuri? Just yes, no. In the formation or registration of Jamhuri Holdings.
Yes, I am sure.
Okay. In your submission, you did say that you are a law firm operating in Kenya. The document that you provided to us earlier actually shows that you operate in 14 other African countries, one of which is Mauritius, under BLC Roberts and Associates. So perhaps was Jamhuri registered by BLC Roberts and Associates?
No. In fact, I can be categoric about it because I'm aware that Helios has other representation in Mauritius. You know, they're such a large entity, Mr. Chairman, they use many lawyers. Okay, we would be one of, I would say, dozens of lawyers that they use. And in Mauritius, I am definitively sure that we did not, nor did our affiliate in Mauritius, form Jamhuri. It was formed by whoever else that Helios chose to use in Mauritius. And incidentally, just as a point, Mr. Chairman, generally in Mauritius, companies are formed by corporate service providers, not law firms, generally speaking. Yeah?
You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. So I think I've dealt with the Cunningham issue and whether I've met him and so on. Maybe I'll deal with the execution issue, Mr. Chairman. I've been asked how these documents were executed. As you know, Mr. Chairman, even before COVID, in a digitalized world, corporate transactions, deals, financing transactions, it's less and less common that people meet in a boardroom like in the old days to sign a document. Okay? And indeed, even in Kenya today, when you are buying a property, very rarely do the buyer and seller physically meet, right? There's an agent involved, the buyer has a lawyer, the seller has a lawyer, they both sign and the document comes back, okay? Indeed, recently we have witnessed, under the auspices of His Excellency the President, an online signing of a major agreement in relation to this country, okay? Where the signing was in fact digitally projected and televised, okay? Just a few weeks back. So this transaction was no different. Jamhuri, through Mr. Cunningham, signed, I presume in the United Kingdom, and I believe there is a attestation that has been provided. I know it was looked at in a previous meeting of these committees that confirmed that he'd appeared before a notary public to sign a certain document. So the SPA, the share transfer forms, were signed by Mr. Cunningham wherever he was. And on the government side, the documents were signed by the government wherever they were. And I was not present, or nor, and in fact, any members of my firm were present when any of those documents were physically signed. Yeah? They were signed by both parties wherever they were. And that's very normal in these transactions.
Chair. It's okay. You
Chair.
give your chance.
Give us just a minute. We don't raise that concern. Were you having a time frame? Were you having a time frame? A time frame, because you are trying to explain to us, you never minded about the signing of documents as far as you receive the document assigned, they are forwarded to the other party, either it's the government to sign. Now, are you having a time frame?
A time frame for the signing?
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously what happens, Mr. Vice Chairman, Honorable Vice Chairman, is that when the execution versions are ready, right, the final versions are ready, they are then sent to both parties, right? And both parties are then required to sign. They're then both required to return them. Then we date the document. That's what we do every day in our practice.
But in this particular one, I'm concerned. What was your mode of, if you are not signing physically, what was your mode of transportation of these documents from one end to other end?
Ah, I see. I understand. So there are two ways we would do that, okay? I can't remember in this particular case which one we did. Because of the availability of email, right? So one way, in the old style, what we would do is we'd physically use a courier, DHL or FedEx or whoever, we'd courier a document, okay? More and more what we do is we send a execution version by email, okay? And we asked them to print it and return it. I don't recall, actually, I just don't remember which method we used on this occasion. I can't remember.
But let me ask you, this is serious. Remember, this is a very heavy transaction. You're also making a lot of money out of it. And remember, this is a government of Kenya transacting with the private entity. And you cannot even remember the day of signing, how the mode of signing. Are you really sincere to this committee?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, what did you eat for lunch last Tuesday?
Remember what I ate for lunch last Tuesday, because...
You're a better man than me.
Yeah.
You're a better man than me. The point is, Mr. Chairman, I'll be true, I swore an oath before I came here, right? It is also the holy month of Ramadan. So I'm happy to take all the questions that the committee wishes to pose, but I don't think I've said anything that allows my sincerity to be called into account. When I can't remember, I will say I can't remember. And I've said, and I'll say again, I don't remember whether I sent a physical copy or a digital copy. What I will also say, Mr. Chairman, is it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter whether I sent a physical copy or a digital copy. Okay? What difference does it make? Everybody signed the same document. Nothing turns on the mode of my delivery, whether I sent it physically or digitally.
I think fair enough.
Chair.
Honorable Kivasu, then Honorable Kil.
Thank you, Chair.
Make it brief to the point because there are so many questions we have not had.
I will do that, Chair. But Karim is not telling us the truth. We have heard from the government that nobody saw Paul Cunningham until he came here. You said you have never met Cunningham until he came here. You only met him in UK. You have met him several times. You are telling us you opted to do digital signing of the documents. At the same time, you are telling us you have been meeting Paul Cunningham in UK. Why did you have to send the documents to him if you are able to move to meet him? 2, 6 billion is not 2 shillings. The government has paid somebody they have never seen. You claim you have seen him. You claim you cannot take the documents to him. Can I also say you have an understanding between you and Paul on the government to have the money from the government and do whatever you wanted to do with it?
Thank you, Honorable Shikil.
Chairman, there's no question about the sincerity of what Mr. Anjawala is saying. It only does not match what our previous witnesses have said. Now, if you remember, both from Treasury and whoever represented the government in this transaction said it very clearly that he signed the document himself, but he does not even know who Paul Cunningham is. He has never seen him. So the question we asked at that time, would you not want to, at a matter of what you call due diligence, know who is the other party who is signing, whether in the current, this was the question I asked him, in the current where there's been so many con men, how would you have known that you have signed here and Paul, a gentleman, the mysterious John Cunningham has signed there? How would you, isn't it you as a senior government official signing away 6 billion shillings would want to know who you've signed with? So the question I have to ask you, if it was digital, and as lawyers you may have an answer, was it live digital where the government official actually saw the other side, Cunningham, on the television, on the screen, or not? Because it brings back question as to our original witness. Let me clarify. We're not questioning the integrity of our gentleman here. We're just questioning on the basis of what he said, our understanding.
Fair enough. I'll give guidance here. The last question by Honorable Shakil, I think, is more related to the government of Kenya official, which you're not representing. So I think that is a matter that we will delve in as a committee. And I think you have clarified on the issue of you don't remember whether you did it digitally or not. So please, we'll take that as your submission. Please answer the questions that follows.
Mr. Chairman, there are two issues that I would like to clean up this diligence issue, if I may, okay, because it's an important one. Do you mind if I just touch on this? So, I was thinking about how to explain this best, and I've been married now, I was married in 1997, okay? So some 26 years. And I felt like this committee was asking, it would be like a spouse asking on the 10th anniversary, who is my wife? Do I know where she's from? Who was her family? Okay. Now, we must remember that Jamhuri was known in 2016. I've just carried here, just for my own reading, I don't need to share it really, press cuttings from 2016. Okay. This transaction, Jamhuri's transaction with the government of the day, was all over the newspaper. Okay. Jamhuri was well known at the time, and the government of the day, that was, I think, the first administration of President Kenyatta and President Ruto. It was then that this transaction was entered into. Everybody was aware and did all the diligence they needed to do. So of course, this committee can look into who is Jamhuri. The point I'm trying to make is that it's a bit like asking your spouse many years after you are married, who are you? Okay? It's not very logical. Okay?
And perhaps if we become that illogical spouse and ask, who owns Jamhuri Holdings?
Right. So I have a company search, Mr. Chairman. Jamhuri Holdings is 100% owned by Helios Genpa 3, the Helios, the third Helios fund, 100%. And the company records in Mauritius, which are available, and I think, in fact, I had anticipated this question, so I have that search. Amongst the documents we'll send you that document. Okay? It proves the 100% ownership of Helios in Jamhuri. Now, yes, it's all there. It's all there.
Maybe just, when was it registered?
You know what? Can I come back to you? Can we quickly search that question?
Sure.
I'll actually give that to you immediately.
Yes,
Yeah.
And honorable members, I really want to persuade you if we do not interrupt our witness, because there are quite some heavy matters that if we keep interrupting, we will not get them. So I really wish that you continue with the questions that we actually did ask.
27th of October, 2015 is the date. Mr. Chairman, there was a question raised by Honorable Shabir about the timing of this transaction.
Repeat the date.
Sorry, that was the date of application. Give us one moment. We will come back to you, sir.
Okay, fine.
We'll come back to you.
Proceed with the other questions.
Yeah, it's around that time. We'll come back to you. There was an interesting question, an important question, I think, raised by Honorable Shabir about the timing. And I was also thinking of an analogy. I was born on the 6th of April. Okay? Now, this means that my late mother and my late father, God bless them, were busy sometime in August 1970. Okay? In August 1970, they were busy, and I was then born on April 6th, 1971. Okay? Now, what I want to tell you about the exit of Jamhuri is that it was in discussion for a long time. Okay? You know the history. You know the issues concerning Airtel. You know the issues concerning the unlawful expropriation of Gong Road, 79 acres on Gong Road. Right? You know all of those issues. I think I don't want to dwell into those more. Okay? But the relationship between Jamhuri and the government had got to the point where Jamhuri could not do anything further to revive or to continue the growth of Telkom Kenya. So on the 15th of July, 2021, it served what is now being called the put option notice. Okay? After that date, there were, of course, further discussions, no doubt. I think there may have been reminders. And eventually we heard from Cabinet Secretary Yatani, I believe on the 29th of March, 2022. Okay? We entered into an agreement on the 31st of May, 2022, and the completion date of that agreement was the 29th of July, 2022, which was, by the deed of variation, extended to the 12th of August, 2022. Now, we are all Kenyans in this room. So, was I conscious of the fact that this transaction, especially once we signed the deed of variation, was going to be completed, I believe, after the election and before the result, right? Broadly speaking. Am I right? 12th of August? Around the second week of August that was the timing. Of course I was aware of that. We're all Kenyans, right? But what I'm trying to say, it's like asking my parents, why was I born on the 6th of April? Okay? I was born on the 6th of April because they were busy in August the previous year. Okay? So it's the same that is true in this transaction. Okay? This is my understanding of how I see things. Okay? It was in the works for a long time, and why Ambassador Yatani, Cabinet Secretary Yatani, chose to write on the 29th of March, I don't know. That's a question you can ask him. Okay? I presume he must have got approvals by that stage. There have been references to NSAC and the cabinet and so on, but those are matters for him. But the first time Jamhuri heard formally in response to say, yes, we are ready to transact, was the 29th of March, 2022. So this goes to the question of timing.
Did you ask yourself, perhaps, someone was trying to make this payment before the next government comes, because perhaps the next government will not make the same decisions?
Mr. Chairman, you know, I want to be very careful that I stick to what I know, because as Kenyans, we can always speculate, right? I mean, we love doing that. I mean, our newspapers are full of speculation. As a legal advisor, I must stick to what I genuinely know, okay? And what I know is what I've told you, okay? Yeah. And we don't act for government, so what I know is that Jamhuri were very persistent about wanting to exit. I think it's important to understand, and Mr. Chairman, I think if I may share some context to the timing, it's important. Because I think there's a bigger question that government needs to ask itself. You know that before Jamhuri became a shareholder, Orange was a shareholder. You're aware of that, right? And I think it's public knowledge that that was a failed partnership. And it ended in acrimony, right? Then you have Africa's greatest private equity fund, Helios, who through Jamhuri become a shareholder. Okay. They come up with a whole bunch of options. Those options include a merger of the mobile business with Airtel as the only way to keep that part of telecom healthy. After many years of negotiations in which the government was involved and approved, at the 11th hour, government as shareholder rejects that. Now, you wonder why. And there's been speculation from other witnesses about national security issues. Those are not for me. But I'm telling you what I know because I was involved in this journey. And then as a shareholder, you find suddenly your property is invaded. 79 acres that you own is invaded and expropriated. An asset that you own. It's your land. It's just taken away by the same government who is your shareholder. So really the question I think the government needs to ask is, why is it so difficult for a globally rated telecom player like Orange to make Telecom Kenya work? Why is it difficult for a globally rated private equity fund like Helios to make telecom work? Right? That's, to me, as a Kenyan, the more important question. And I was on that journey. And so it shouldn't be a surprise. My point is, coming back to the question the Honorable Shabir asked, it should not be a surprise that Helios wanted to get, to use colloquial language, the hell out of telecom. And there was no other way to make it work. Right? They needed to get out of telecom because there was no way in which they could cooperate in a meaningful way with the government of Kenya to turn around telecom. That's the reality. Okay? I don't know whether it's been said to you as plainly as I'm saying it now, but I'm saying it to you plainly now. And that's really the important question. Right? That's really the important question. Now, so that explains the question of timing. I'm trying to look at whether there are any questions from Honorable Shabir that I have really not addressed. He asked me a broader question about loyalty to Kenya and my sincerity. I think I've addressed that now as best as I can. Okay? There was a question from the Vice Chair. And Mr. Chairman, you asked a question about payments. This is a very important one, actually. About the payments that flowed back, it seems, to us. Okay? Let me make a few points here. John Gumi and ourselves are not affiliated in any way. Of course, we know each other. This is a small community. He has been a well-known banker at Stanbic and previous to that at Citibank and so on. So we have dealt with each other, but I have dealt with many transaction advisors. Okay? So let me put that one to rest. We are not affiliated in the way, say, Adili and ourselves are affiliated. Okay? The payments that I believe came back to us were two. One for our legal fees, some $442,000. Okay? Mr. Chairman, I want to, although I don't need to justify my legal fees because the government was not my client, I want to just put it into context. Okay? This was for work done for maybe 2 years, okay? Not just on the sale transaction, because as I've explained, this exit process took a long time. Okay? Secondly, if this was a litigation in Kenya, okay, of the same quantum as 6 billion, the scale fees under the advocate's remuneration order would have been 135 million shillings. Okay? That's about $1 million at the current exchange rate. So more than double the fees that we charged. Okay? Just to be clear. So our fee was proportionate and commensurate, and it's charged in the way we normally charge our corporate clients, largely on a complexity and time basis. We have hourly rates, which our clients are aware of, and we charge those. In Kenya shilling terms, at the current rate, it will be less than 60 million. I think about 54 million? About 54 million at the current rate. Okay? And I stress this was for more than 2 years of work. Okay? The only other payment that came to us from Jamhuri, I say to us, to our affiliated entity called Adili, was in account of the management incentive plan. Okay? As I've explained, Mr. Chairman, Adili is separately managed and run, and I believe you're meeting them later today. Okay? But I did draft the management incentive plan documents. I did. Yes, back in 2016, 17. Yes, 16, 17. I mean, 17, 18. Okay? 2017, 2018. So I'm familiar with structure. And the structure envisages the trustee, and the trustee was Adili. Now, the management of Adili will speak to you in detail, but what I know is that whatever money they would have received would have been paid out to either the current or former employees of Telkom Kenya Limited. Right? Adili would not have retained any of those monies. They were simply paid out in accordance with their obligations under a trust deed that was entered into in 2017, 2018. Okay? But they will speak to that in a lot more. You'll have an opportunity to interrogate them in more detail. Okay? Mr. Chair.
Yes, Honorable Angat.
Yeah, in regard to the payment, the one you're saying, it is related to work for 2 years. Is there any reason why you are not paid previously and only now you are paid when the government of Kenya has paid Jamhuri? Was there any good reason why the payment only came from this payment from government?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a one-word answer to that, which is biashara. Okay? Ni mambo ya biashara. I tell you why. Okay? Helios is an existing client of ours. Okay? So private equity funds generally, okay, prefer to pay from sale proceeds, right? And because they were an existing client of ours, or for whom we are doing other work, this is not the only work we were doing for.
Maybe did you have any other payment from them within the last 2 years? Any other payment for other works, not necessarily related to?
Mr. Chairman, I mentioned at the start of my discussion about legal professional privilege. I have to respect the privilege of my clients. What I can say is I've definitely worked for Helios on other transactions and other matters unconnected to this one. So to answer your question, Honorable Agat, the private equity funds, Helios and the rest, prefer to pay from proceeds of sale. And as a law firm, we make a business decision. Okay? Do we accept that or do we not accept that? In the case of Helios, because they've been a client for 15 years, I was prepared to wait. But to answer the question another way, had the deal with the government not consummated, I would still have been paid. Okay? Either way, I was going to get paid because it was not a contingent deal, but I was just prepared to give them credit, as you do in Biashara. It's normal. And it's normal for private equity funds, whether they operate on that basis. Mr. Chairman, just I think I don't know whether the honourable members feel, and through you, Chair, whether I've addressed the issues that have been raised. Maybe I can just go back to this question of conflict. There was some question raised about whether we are conflicted and so on and so forth. Let me just try to address that, okay? So, I don't know, Honourable Chairman, whether you own a company. Okay? Assume you own a company, okay? And assume you're the majority shareholder. Do you expect to appoint the lawyer in the normal way? You would, right? So in that scenario, the lawyer can act for the shareholder and acts for the company. It would be normal. It would be bizarre, in fact, for you to say, no, my company must have a separate lawyer from me. Okay? So there's no conflict in that scenario. Right? Why was Adili appointed? Adili, Mr. Chairman, is an extremely well-respected company administration business, the largest, in fact, in the country. Okay? They do this job. And obviously, when the board of Telecom Kenya was looking to see who could be the trustee, they would use somebody they could already trust and who they already knew. Okay? And so they asked us. We said, no, we don't do this, but feel free to speak to Adili. And they spoke to Adili and they agreed whatever terms that they agreed. So there's no conflict of interest in any respect. It's quite normal, in fact, for this to occur. I think, Mr. Chairman, I've addressed the issues. There was one point to clarify from the Vice Chairman. The data we have suggests that Jamhuri was created on the 27th of October, 2015. Yeah? But again, just like the escrow agreement, we will provide the search as well as the ownership details of Jamhuri, which was mentioned earlier.
Thank you very much. The last statement, just luckily enough for you, you are a private firm, because if that happened in government, then you would be in trouble, because you cannot be the legal advisors and then your affiliate firm is a trustee. That would definitely be a conflict, but then you are a private entity, so you may get away with that. But if you did that right now when Jamhuri would be owned by 100% by GUK, making it a government parastatal, it would be a different story altogether. And now, what would be your views on the current legal status of the ownership of Jamhuri?
I've been giving this thought, Mr.
No, Jamhuri, sorry, Telkom.
Telkom, yeah. I've been giving this thought. Here's the best way I can explain it to you. Assume I have a Toyota Corolla, and I've agreed to sell it to you, Mr. Chairman. Okay? What would I do? You'd agree a price, you'd inspect the car, I'd give you a logbook and a transfer form, right? And I'd hand it over to you. I'd expect you to go to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles and do the rest, as long as you've paid me my money. So let's say we agree 1 million shillings for my Corolla. Right? You give me 1 million, I give you the logbook, I give you the transfer form. I would expect you would go and do the rest. Occasionally it happens that you go have an accident before you do the transfer. And I get a letter from somebody who was injured to say, oh, by the way, you injured me on Wayaki Way or something. But the fact is, it's your car. The car is yours. I transfer. Whatever I had to do as the seller, I did. Whatever you had to do as the buyer, you did. You gave me the money. You just failed in one thing. You failed to register. So the question is, there's nothing more for Jamhuri to do. Okay? It is as simple, and I believe that Cabinet Secretary Yatani confirmed he had even sent the stamp duty form to the registrar for assessment, because the government is exempt from stamp duty, but it has to be assessed on the form. Okay? So all the government has to do is just register the transfer. It's in the government's hands. Okay? They must have the reasons why they wish not to do that, but there's nothing more for Jamhuri to do.
Interesting. Do you have any last particular questions? You have Honorable Vice Chair, then Honorable Kivasu.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Karim. I'm just concerned when you talk about Jamhuri Holdings on the payments. 2 years. You are paid after work for 2 years. And you're a lawyer. And I'm still imagining Anjawala and Jamhuri being one at the same time. And if you had services to provide to Jamhuri, I guess there must have been an agreement on those services. And in that agreement, there must be payment terms. You had agreed on some payment terms. Here you are saying because of friendship, you could work for 2 years and get paid anytime Jamhuri gets paid. That puts me to understand you know better Jamhuri Holdings than what we know. Can you give us that payment terms that you had reached agreement with when you started this process of working for Jamhuri? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Miruka, then Honorable Mboni.
Now, mine, I'm very happy that you have given me that Jamhuri Holdings was registered October 2015. Is that true? 2015, eh? And again, are you aware that it also acquired 60% shares on June 2016 from Telecom? Now, am I wrong to say that it was purposely formed for this function?
Yes, this is the last round of questions. Honorable Mboni.
Yes, Chairman, I think the first thing I want to do is that I want to commend Karim for being honest on the issue of meeting Paul Cunningham. I think you are the only person who has come forward in this committee and confirmed that he has met Paul Cunningham. Even the government officers, they actually declined to tell us they have ever met Paul Cunningham. So for that, I think I should commend you for being honest man.
He's the only one who, Mr. Cunningham, is not Mr. Mysterious.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's very good. But now I was looking at this payment, how the money was disputed. Your firm got some money. There's a bank, International Investment Bank, got $1 million US. Actually, you got $422,000 US. And then John Gumi got 3 billion. Now, I'm just wondering, this transaction, because the loan was 48 billion US, which was taken by Jamhuri and given to Telecom. Then the interest was 3 billion. From this transaction, all of it is like, Jamhuri was not for the money because they actually even lost what they had invested. They sold the shares to Kenya at $1. And then the money they received, even the interest, they gave all of it plus $1 million US. Don't you see it is a bit queer to me, this kind of transaction? How do you think about it? Thank you. Honest man, let me repeat.
Thank you. And perhaps, did you also meet, in any of those conversations, did you ever meet the former Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Kuriatan, about this transaction? And did you act for Telecom, or did you just act on behalf of Jamhuri?
May I respond to all the questions, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
What your question? Yes, he said he met. No, not Ghana. No, Yatani. What kind of meeting was this? Was it part of the negotiation of this deal?
I think that has not, he hasn't answered the question. You just asked whether he has ever met Okuri at any deliberations, and I think he has not said that yet.
No, you said that.
He said, okay.
Yeah. Body language, man.
Oh, okay.
Chair.
You may proceed.
Chair.
Honorable
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Karim. My question is, when did you introduce Adili trustees to Telecom Kenya? You said that Telecom Kenya asked you about if you knew any trustees, and what is your relationship exactly? You said it's an affiliate, so is the proceeds still coming to you guys? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just address the last question first. I don't know the exact date, Honourable but it would have been, I imagine it would have been in 2017. Okay, end of 2016 or sometime in 2017 is when I would have made the introduction. My relationship to Adili is that I am a shareholder amongst others. Okay? Amongst others. Okay? As to whether I met Cabinet Secretary Yatani in connection with this transaction, I never met him in connection with this transaction. I have met him previously, but unconnected to this transaction. As to our fees from Honorable Kibasu and why we are so poor in collecting them, look, it's just, as I've said, I think in response to Honorable Agat, it's simply biashara, okay? Helios is an existing client. We have other work with them, and we were prepared to wait. Okay, and it's not the only client we wait for. Maybe the lawyers you work with are harder than us, but it's very normal for us. And Mr. Chairman, just for the record, amongst a few lawyers, I do the most private equity work in the country, working for private equity funds, and this is normal for us. That we wait until the closing of a transaction before we are paid. It's unfortunate, but normal.
Was there an agreement?
Other law firms will be doing the same. Other law firms who are similar to us will be doing the same thing. Turning to the question of Honorable Boni about Jamhuri losing money and so on. Okay. You're quite right, Honorable Boni, that I think they received some $51 million, which was the principal plus interest, right? And once you deduct what they would have paid for consultancies, legal fees, and the MIP, they would have received less than what they invested. That is correct, right? I guess the truth is, and what I said, in my earlier response to Honorable Shabir's question as to why they were keen to exit. Okay, let's just say that Telecom Kenya would not have necessarily been their greatest investment. Okay, there's some investments in which you make money, and there's some investments in which you don't. Okay, and Telecom was one in which, the more important thing was to allow the government to take over, rather than the return on investment that you could have made. Yeah.
There's one question on the SPV.
There was an important question from the Vice Chairman about the SPV. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, because it is important for the country, this point about SPVs. Yeah? And just to explain it, the Honorable Vice Chairman noted that Jamhuri, although formed in October 2015, in 2016 had become the shareholder of Telcom. Okay. Now, the point that I would make is that private equity funds, which are amongst the biggest investors in this country, okay, so a lot of the deals you see in Kenya, big deals where fresh money is flowing into the country. Okay, I don't want to mention names because not everyone wants to be named in Parliament, but there are many, many very good transactions for the country where private equity funds are involved. Okay? And I personally can't think of a single one where they haven't formed a special purpose vehicle. Okay? it is the standard practice in Africa and pretty much across the world for private equity funds to form special purpose vehicles. There are very good legal and commercial reasons why they do that. I don't think today is the forum to explain that, except to say that it is absolutely normal, and I myself have never done a deal for a private equity fund. And is that right? You also, yeah? I've never done a deal for a private equity fund, Helios or any other, where they haven't formed an SPV. Okay? And the SPV is normally formed. Sometimes, in fact, Mr. Honorable Vice Chairman, it can even be formed the week before the transaction. Okay? So the timing can look even more weird in that sense. But it's actually very normal. It's the way private equity funds work. I believe I addressed the remaining questions.
I think that will be the end, but perhaps, would you know who the investment bank was in this transaction? Who they?
Mr. Chairman, I do know, but I am not unable to disclose it, I'm afraid. Mr. Cunningham said the same thing. It's protected by privilege. What I would say, what I can say, is that it is a globally recognized bank with whom you'd be familiar. The reason I can't disclose it is because we don't have the authority to do so, and there are legally binding agreements to that effect. And unless we get their authority, or upon further constraint by you, there could be a disclosure made. But I'm afraid today I can't say so.
You know, by you notes, and you see, I'm asking because I read the response from Mr. Paul Cunningham. He said the same thing. That's not allowed to authorize disclosure of who this investment bank is. You make it more difficult. You know, when you, because we will now have to take the powers given to us by the Constitution to force to name. And if they have nothing to be afraid of, you know, people do transactions all the time. If it's an investment bank operating in Kenya or globally, the fact that they were the ones on this transaction doesn't mean anything unless they have something to hide. And if then they are afraid being mentioned in Parliament, it makes it even worse, because now they are mentioned after us forcing them to, for us to mention. It would be much easier. Our investment bank was X. There's nothing wrong with that. There would be a bank that would be involved in the transaction anyway.
So, I hear you, Mr. Chairman. What I can say is that I'll take your sentiments away. Okay? As I said, you know, the privilege belongs to the client. And in this case, not even so much to the client, to the bank, okay? Because they're the one constraining the client from making the disclosure. You asked me whether I know who it is. I told you I do. Okay? So what I will do is I'll take it away to the client, because, in fact, I agree with you that, and when you know who it is, I mean, it will not be complicated. Okay? It's a very straightforward name. Okay? I'll take it away. And I'll request to see whether we can get the bank to waive their confidentiality. I'll explain to them that you have further powers to try to constrain us, and we will come back to you on that point. Yeah? Because, you know, I think we've tried to, Mr. Chairman, we've tried to cooperate, I hope you can see, as much as we can. Okay? Maybe, Mr. Chairman, I can answer your question in a certain way, okay? And let me be. Okay, let me answer it in may I consult for 1 minute? Eh? Mr. Chairman, what I will say, the easiest way to deal with it is to say it is an international bank whose headquarters are not in Kenya, whose chief office is not in Kenya. I think that's the most I can say, and it may address another concern that I know has been raised in a previous discussion. Okay, that's I think the most I can say at this stage. But I've heard you, and I'll take it away.
But you realize you haven't told us anything, right? Yes, Honorable Boni.
You know, it's very interesting. I have a document here which shows that actually at the end of the day, Jamhuri paid several groups around 10 million US dollars. And some of the people who are paid are former and current telecom employees who are paid 4 million US dollars as incentives. I think there's a scheme.
Honorable Boni, could I just give you some more guidance?
Yeah.
Our next witness is a Dili. And a Dili are the handlers of this incentive plan. So that question will become, just save it for a few minutes. Our next witness will be best placed to answer this question.
You can answer. Okay. Okay, sir.
Because the next session is purely on that discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just to get more understanding, Karima said clearly that this bank is international bank. Can we know the country where it's operating from?
Yes, my view on this, instead of speculating, talk to your client. We will get the bank anyway. So it is easier for them to volunteer with what the bank is. Let's not speculate. Even if it's registered in Mauritius or in London, it could be any bank. Just as you said, take it away, and then we will get the bank anyway. So it's easier if they tell us who it is. Honorable Vice Chair.
On the same bank, but now you have addressed it, eh? Because at long last, even if the identity is secure, at long last we will get it.
Chair.
Yes, Honorable Vice Chair, Finance.
Yeah, I think it's good you have said we give them time to go and solve such, because anyway it will come out. And my other small question is on the escrow agreement, on the remuneration, cost and expenses, where it says the escrow fee shall be charged to the seller. How much was the escrow fee, or is it inclusive of the 54 million which you are paid?
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I'll deal with the last question first. It was inclusive. And just to put into context, the fee would have been so small if it was separate. I don't think it could have reached even $2,000. Okay? It was just part of doing the job, if I can put it that way. It was a very small. It would have been a very small amount. Okay? Yeah, relatively small money compared to the overall fee. Okay? In relation to the question about the bank, Mr. Chairman, as you know, in Mr. Cunningham's last response, I think that apart from that one entry, he provided full details on the various classes of payments. Okay? There was a payment to ourselves. There was a payment to John Ngumi. There was a payment to this bank. There was a payment to Adili, and there was a payment to some employees. Okay? So you can see from that, Mr. Chairman, that we've tried to be as open as we can be. Okay? We are under a constraint on this bank not because of our clients' reluctance, but because of the banks. Okay? I just want to make that very clear. And but we've heard you, we'll take it away. All I can tell you for now is that there's no smoking gun. You have to take my word for it, but it isn't a smoking gun. And I wish I could just tell you to take that issue away, but as soon as I can, I hope I can, I will. There's one point that was raised by, I believe, which you have parked to Adili, but which I would like to deal with actually. Okay? Because as you know, I'm just looking for the Cunningham letter. Yeah. No, the second one. So if you look at the second letter from my friend Paul, you'll see that there are two payments on page 4. There's one that was paid to Adili for 2.66 million, and the Adili team will explain to you those payments. And there's one clumped together for 1.3 million. The Adili team are not probably aware of this. I don't know if they are or they are not. I don't think they are. And let me explain. The management incentive plan that we drafted, and Mr. Chairman, I would ask, do you have a copy of it? Okay. Would you like a copy? Okay. We will share a copy with you. Okay. That we drafted had a vesting period. It vested in 4 installments, okay, 25% a year, and its idea was to help retention, okay, and to reward and incentivize loyalty of staff. Now, what occurred, Mr. Chairman, is that for certain staff, the management incentive plan had been exhausted, that the vesting period no longer applied, and so Jamhuri made separate arrangements outside the management incentive plan, but equivalent to the management incentive plan, to incentivize those employees. Those would have been people, largely people who joined later. So I just wanted to explain that, because Adili can't speak to those payments.
Honourable members, I think we have exhausted this discussion. There's a point here I'm trying to get, but perhaps I will get back to you, because we're trying to retrieve the answer of our witness, Mr. Paul Cunningham, on the payment. And when we asked about the payment, he actually said how much was paid, and he says $4.5 million. And then, okay, yeah, he said he was not sure what it was for. I was trying to get if what he said and what you said, just to make sure that what he said on oath actually. I'm telling you this because you speak on behalf of the client's lawyers anyway, so that to see if they tally.
Mr. Chairman, I was listening to Paul Cunningham yesterday when I was preparing for this. I believe if you go back to the full transcript, you'll find that he was referring to the transaction advisor's fees. And if you add up the million, the payment to ourselves and the payment to Mr. Ngumi, it comes to about 4.5. Yeah, but please check. But that's what I believe he was referring to.
That's fine. I think we would like to thank you very much for appearing before us. And again, sorry we started a little late. You know, Wednesday mornings we have also sittings of the plenary. So in fact, we had to ask permission from the speaker so that we actually sit when Parliament is sitting, because we really want to bring a closure on this particular matter. The information you have provided is extremely useful, at this joint inquiry, and we ask that you provide the two, I think it is the 3 documents that you've asked to review formally, so that they are properly received in Parliament. You did raise a very key concern, and I think this joint committee takes seriously those views. We had Orange, one of the largest telecoms, get frustrated in telecom. And then we, again, a few years later, frustrated Airtel into this particular transaction. That report, we have one of the largest equity funds in Africa. Again, we frustrated them, they have to exit. So is it a script, perhaps, to make sure that telecom doesn't work, to make sure telecom continues to make losses, every year? And finding this a very unfortunate incident in almost all the other government-owned entities, including Kenya Airways. Every other airline is making profit, Airways is making losses, and you have every year to get to the exchequer to pay. Every telecom in this country is making insane profits. You know, talk about Safaricom, they're making crazy profits, including even expanding to other countries. Telecom, you would expect, especially government of Kenya having an interest owning like now 40% shareholders, even all just the communication services of government entities alone. You know, if we just allowed telecom to just handle the communication services of all government entities, that would be enough revenue to make sure that this company actually makes a profit. But you see a consistent way to make sure we frustrate the existence and the profitability of telecom, which I assure you as a concerned Kenyan, and I'm saying this because you raised it, this joint committee will make a decision that we must make sure we put people to account to turn back telecom into profitability, because we can't allow this. We can't allow this. Everyone else is making profit apart from a government-owned entity. And every effort to turn it back to its feet is either frustrated by some dubious reasons, or where transactions are done that, you know, again raises questions, because even this joint inquiry alone has a negative impact on the credibility of telecom, because we've gone on and on and on and on telecom. Again, during the acquisition of Orange, there are questions about it. During the acquisition of Airtel, there are questions about it. So I think we must end this roller coaster, this game of trying to make government agencies not to work. So I'll leave you to make your closing remarks. Just on a light note, I've learned quite a lot about you this morning. I know you got married in 1997. I know you're either a Tarus or an Arias in terms of your stay. You were born in April. You must like Toyota, because Toyota must be your preferred brand. And most likely you bank with KCB. You make your closing remarks.
And Chair, more importantly, he's an honest man.
And in his honesty, he's the only one who met Mr. Cunningham many times.
Before and after.
And actually, you didn't tell us whether you met Okuriatani or not. I think I missed that. Or if you did, I missed that.
Mr. Chairman, I did answer that. I didn't. I've met him once before, but not in connection with this transaction.
You may make your closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we have covered substantial ground today. I am very grateful for having been given the opportunity to help the Joint Committee with in any way that I can. I think that the questions you've asked have been the right ones. I've tried to answer them as fulsomely as I can. The story of telecom is one that is a long one, as you know. Our role, I think, was clear. I've tried to clarify our role. I've tried to clarify the fact that we were not holding any money in escrow. We were only ever holding documents, and that actually provided security to the government. There is perhaps one point I'd like to make in closing again, is I think as this joint committee focuses on how to incentivize more investment into Kenya, on the one hand, Parliament's role in inquiring into these matters is critical and important. On the other hand, and I made this point in my opening, that we must be careful not to become a country that is very welcoming to capital when it arrives, but is difficult with capital when it leaves. Because capital will then make its decisions about where to flow. Capital should be able to flow relatively easily coming in and relatively easily coming out. Of course, it is critical that the exchequer is protected, and that is your job, and I fully appreciate that. But private equity, Helios in this case in particular, but private equity in general, is an incredibly important growth opportunity for Kenya. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, Kenya has become a regional, some could say, Africa-wide superpower. More and more companies want to headquarter in Kenya and do business in Africa. And we should be encouraging private equity funds particularly to do so. So maybe that's all, Mr. Chairman, I need to say in closing. If I just can request Mr. Ngumi and Ms. Kinue, if there's anything further. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify one point that I believe you are now meeting with Adili. I will exit, but Mrs. Kinue and Mr. Ngumi will remain to accompany the management team of Adili. I trust that is in order.
That's very much in order. And perhaps on a light note, last time when we asked Mr. Ngumi a question, he said he was not appearing before us as so this now that to be appearing now before us as the lawyers, you may introduce yourself and say something. And I'll also give a chance to Ms. Kanwe to do that, now that you're rightfully appearing before this committee.
Honorable Chairman, thank you very much. As I had mentioned previously, my name is Daniel Ngumi, advocate, a partner with the firm of Anjawala and Kana. Incidentally, while I'm a partner with the same firm, today I was here as counsel. He was my client, as we will be in the next session with Adili. Thank you very much.
Just on a light touch, this Ngumi and the other one, are they related?
You may or may not answer. It's up to you.
If you notice, my name is written with a Y. His is written with an I. But I think today I'm not a witness. He may be best placed to answer that question. Thank you.
Lawyers have a way of answering and not answering. You have not answered the question, but anyway. Ms. Kanwe.
Honorable Chairman or Chairpersons, my name is Anne Kinuhe. I'm also a partner at Anjawala and Kana Advocates. And also just to confirm that I was here in my capacity as an advocate representing Karim Anjawala. Thank you.
And just to note, your client today had a gist of the matter. He was more of the one answering the questions than the previous witness, who I think it was more of you answering the question than it was the witness. Anyway, thank you very much again. You have a good afternoon. Honorable members, could I consult? It's 1 p.m. Do we speak to Adili now, or do we break for a few minutes for lunch? Or perhaps give yourself an hour so that we finish with Adili, then break at 2 and come back at 3?
1 hour. 1 hour is okay.
Eh?
1 hour.
We break for 1 hour. Honorable members, is that a good plan? Okay, fine. So for Mr. Ngumi and Anne Kinuhe, we break for lunch. We come back here at 2. Yeah, so free you to take a lunch break, and then we meet here at 2. And thank you very much, Mr. Again, Kiri, today for the good work that you've done. Asante.
Thank you and much obliged. Thank you.
Much obliged.